Peter Smith, welcome to Caleido podcast.
Nice to be here. Thanks for the invite.
So you grew up on a pig farm. How does that help to be a great entrepreneur?
I think that being a farmer, so what my dad was, and my mom basically as well, is like, the ultimate pinnacle of being an entrepreneur. It's not like every task that you have on the farmer, you hire a different contractor to do it. This means that, my dad, he was doing his own accounting. He was doing his own construction work. He was an electrician. He was like, besides herding the pigs, he was a nutritionist. I mean, knowing kind of like what to feed his pigs. Basically, any type of like role or task you're having, he was kind of like having ourselves. And that I think is very typical of a true entrepreneur. They're not persons that are kind of like good in one thing, but they have, this T-shaped skill set where, they have one specialism maybe, but they are generally good in everything you do. And of course, growing up there, as small kids, we were already kind of like helping out with anything we want to do. Of course, we only wanted to drive the tractor at first, but at a certain moment, you really got to see like, okay, hey, all these things he's doing is actually fun. And you get to kind of like learn with that. And I think by the age of 11, 12, I already was helping with administration stuff as well and kind of like understanding what's going on when you're an entrepreneur like that.
So you were helping your father and mother in multiple tasks.
Yeah, indeed. So of course, I'm an IT guy. So at certain moments, it got reduced to maybe kind of like the IT part of stuff. I never liked really working with the pigs. I mean, my brothers were better in that. I never really liked cleaning the barns. That was also, my brothers were better in that. But for me, indeed, like, driving around tractor, doing electric wiring. I mean, really, I wouldn't give my 11-year-old electric wiring nowadays to actually like fix, but I did that when I was like that age. And that was great. I mean, it's a good learning school. And later with administration-wise, software-wise, internet-wise, I ran an internet provider basically for them just to make certain that they were having the right amount of internet.
Did you program any software for your family?
No, I don't think I did. I don't think I did any program software. I mean, that only started, when I was like, even though I was already on the farm and busy working there, when I was 13, I started working at the Lily farm, kind of like quite quickly was kind of like doing a little stuff there as well. And then when I was, I think 15, 16, I started working for another company where I did start programming stuff when they needed, a program to attach pictures to specific old machines. And but within no time, I actually like wrote a program to actually do that. And I recently heard that now 20 years later, they're still using it.
Really? So 20
Yes.
year old technology. So that means that it's super robust.
I mean, when I was like 15, like, come on, like the stuff I was writing then, it's so, no, I can't imagine that it's still running, but apparently it does. It must have been more robust than I thought it was.
Okay, how did you do your school?
So after primary school, I went to secondary school, and in of course in the Netherlands, different system than in Finland. You start secondary school when you were age 12. I was not a super student. I was very good in everything data, in everything technical. So physics or math, I would kind of like shine, but languages that was like killing me. I mean, why on earth would I kind of like want to learn German, French, or English? Or even if I would want to, I would have to kind of like start memorizing word lists. I don't do memorizing things just because somebody tells me. I only do it when it's interesting. So actually, I didn't even follow the highest kind of like course. I mean, normally you already get divided into grades. And in the first 3 years, a lot of like obligatory subjects like French and German, like it was all like no fun. I never had to do any homework before in primary school. I wasn't really planning on going to that now. My computer was more interesting. This changed a bit when I had to go to the 4th grade. Then you really could specialize in the subjects you like. And suddenly all my grades were, higher than everyone else's. And then they decided like, wait a moment. I mean, they said to me when I just finished my secondary school, like, you should have been like on a higher one, because especially when you specialize, you're having way too high grades for this level. But yeah, that's what happened. Result was I couldn't really go to university straight away. I first had to do an applied science university bachelor, which was, again, for me, It was relatively easy. It was only 4 days anyway in a week that you had some lessons, and homework was almost nothing for me. I really kind of like put all my time that I had at home in learning, engineering and IT and like programming. And that one day in the week that I didn't have any lessons, I indeed started working at this machine company where they had polishing machines, and really kind of like just sucked in everything I saw in the world, and like listened, like learned how to kind of like do tech and kind of like see around me what's happening. And then in my bachelor's, then actually there was it's an interesting program. It was called Industrial Math and Informatics. And it was right in a university that had only soft subjects otherwise. So, you had apparently in the Netherlands, leisure management is a real thing that people want to study, or like hotel school or stuff like this. So more, how do you say, subjects that are not so exact. And then there was this one industrial math and informatics course on that university. And people underestimated that one a bit, because that class I started with, that was in 2004, I think. We started with 25 people. And before the year was over, there was 5 people left in my class.
Okay.
And another year more, and we were with 3 students left, which clearly also caused the university a lot of problems, because how can you kind of like, arrange teaching for just 3 students? And that's immediately the story how I came to Finland, because it wasn't habit in the university to send students on exchange, on Erasmus exchange, to other countries. I hadn't really thought about it myself. I mean, what does a farmer's boy want to go and do in a different country? And I didn't even think I was so good in languages. Actually, that had just changed maybe English. I could, because of all the IT stuff, I nowadays could speak English. But then, it was a habit to send. And the previous year, some students had gone to Finland, an exchange in Espoo. And one of the 3 persons got really enthusiastic in our group, saying like, yeah, I also would like to do that exchange. So of course the university was already like, then we're only teaching 2 students. In other words, you're either all going or none of you is going.
Okay.
They didn't say that straight, but that was kind of like clear. So then of course, like when that comes on your path, you're thinking like, why not? I mean, let's see something of the world. And then even, turned out that the university that was normally accepting the students only accepted 2. So we had to quickly find a second university in Finland. I mean, again, we still searched in Finland, a second university in Finland that also wanted to take exchange students. So in the end, we drew straws, like who was going to Espoo, who was going to Turku. I pulled a short, long straw. I don't know which one it was, but in the end, the other 2 went to Espoo, and I went by myself to Turku.
Okay.
Of all places, to do a couple months of exchange there at Applied Sciences University in their IT program. And that's where my Finland adventure basically started.
How did you meet your wife? Tell us a story. A traditional story.
We don't know exactly where we saw each other first. I think we saw each other first at university. So it was a quite big degree program where I was an exchange student in. And in that the degree program, she was as well. So that is basically, we're in the same place. And actually then the first time we really met was I went to some church happening in Turku. I went to sit on the translation row. And she was, even though she was Finnish, she was sitting there because she had a Chinese friend with her. And then I think, oh yes, she recognized me. So she must have seen me at university already. And she was like, hey, do I know you from something? And we got to talk and became friendly. And over that 4 months, I mean, we were in multiple courses together. We, slowly something started to grow. I mean, I was a guy who was not kind of like, swayed so quickly. But after a few months, I was like, oh, wait a moment. This is someone that's kind of like worth, sticking around for. So before I then went back in December, turned out like there was like romance going there. And then I had only like a half year left in my bachelor studies. So I went a half year back to the Netherlands to finish those, applied for Finnish universities and came back in summer. And we actually got married and have been happy since together. So 2008 summer, my proper Finnish adventure started when we moved to Espoo and I got my master's at a real university.
How many children you have?
We had 3 children, like 3 boys. So, and nowadays ages 2023, 4, 6, ages 6 to 11. I always have to remember the birth years because, their ages, they change all the time.
Yeah. Tell us about cultural differences between Dutch and Finnish society.
In a lot of things, the Dutch and Finnish society are relatively the same. I mean, just to give a couple of examples, even like in the things we eat. I mean, both Finland and the Netherlands are the only countries, or they think they're the only countries that have licorice as like a proper snack, which is kind of like funny. I mean, the Netherlands thinking that we're the only one, Finland, we're the only one. But it turns out they have it in common. Drinking coffee, they're there together in the top part of the world, like in matters of people drinking coffee. They both also pride themselves about being direct and not talking too much around things, which kind of like matches also very well with me. I'm the similar type of person. There's also differences though. I mean, Dutch people, they can't shut up. They keep on talking, and Finns, they love to kind of like sometimes bathe in silence as well. In Dutch, in the Netherlands, you would be sometimes more direct, as in like, if something is going wrong, you also will tell the person. And if somebody has a bad haircut, you might actually tell them you have a bad haircut. What happened with you? In Finland, judging is sometimes more silent or kept on a distance. But of course, that also means that Finns sometimes, understands that, a look from a neighbor is actually meaning a judgment.
Yes.
And I think those are kind of like the biggest differences. On the other hand, entrepreneur-wise, yeah, I think Dutch people, yeah, I mean, entrepreneurial is in the blood. I see this with Finns. It's a bit more divided. I mean, some of them have it, some of them are more happy with, really kind of like, doing your, going to the office and being a good, just a citizen of society. In the Netherlands, you see much more often maybe the drive to, okay, I want to do something more. I want to kind of like even go further than this. I think Finns are sometimes easier to be content with things. And I mean, that is a good skill as well.
Let's move to your doctoral thesis. What was the topic?
I mean, we're a small bit skipping the masters. So I started doing masters machine learning data mining. So that's basically artificial intelligence before artificial intelligence was like really a hype. It really kind of like means that. Funnily enough, it's even like a more specific, better thing than just AI, what everyone shouts now.
Tell us more about the master thesis then.
My master's thesis was, so the master's was machine learning and data mining, and the thesis itself already kind of like started in the speech recognition department. So funnily enough, even though I'm like an expert in like language technology and speech technology, the thing that those two things have in common is the word technology. I've been interested in technology. How can I use my math, knowledge and like, engineering skills to kind of like build things. So when I was in the university, I was selected as a student that could come and like be part of the research groups straight away. And I didn't care if it was like image recognition or speech recognition. That group was like, hey, do you want to come? And I was like, yeah, sure, I can work on technology here. So I mean, if I would have kind of like thought when, this teenager, like, hey, was not good in languages, are you going to be the one that's going to like really build language technology? I would have said like, no. I mean, I don't have a language hat, so why would I do that? I have an engineering hat, but I was there in that group and really like got really excited about like what you can do, kind of like how can you just with ones and zeros make a computer actually like recognize things from real life, do things in real life, and actually going forward. And in that sense, my master's wasn't so separate from the doctoral thesis because, okay, I started working in the research group on my master's thesis. And after it, I don't know even if I had a really proper discussion, as in like, are you going to continue with your doctoral work? Or, I mean, it was almost just like a given. No one kind of like questioned like, are you wanting to do this? Are you supposed to do this? And they kind of like just expected he will keep on showing up and he'll actually do his doctorate. And I kept on showing up. It was, 6 years that it took. It took a long time, but I got my doctorate done. I wasn't a typical scientist though. Typical scientist, builds this hypothesis, has already kind of like, a far-fetched vision of where he ends up and then kind of like, works kind of like very structured towards it. I just wanted to learn. So I learned all parts of speech recognition. Speech recognition is a very complicated subject with very many different kind of like pieces. Normally you become an expert in one. I didn't I didn't know what to pick. The topics I had in mind, they were all from different expertises, and turned out in the group, even though they were all brilliant scientists, not all of them were as proficient engineering-wise as I was. So I'm a person that then helps. So I started helping everyone else, which first was very good for me because I got to learn a lot of stuff. It was good for them because they got experiments maybe done faster or better, or when they needed to run something on the big computing cluster. It actually it worked because I was kind of on board to help and guide. And that made me really kind of able to build everything in a speech recognition system from scratch. And in the end, I did focus, and I really did kind of do my sciencey part and made certain that I really kind of made contributions. And the contributions I made was, okay, you have this, speech recognition system. Normally, when you would have a team that would make a speech recognizer, you have a team that kind of of linguists, of language experts that tell you how language works. And then you have the engineer kind of that builds the model, and somebody that provides the data, and it has to all come together to kind of do this. Even though I liked working together with the other scientists, I still didn't like language. So I was like, how can I do this without the language experts? Can I do this with just, data I find? Can I do this with just, the techniques? So kind of can I, without being a language expert, actually build, this type of systems? And that's where basically the research kind of came from. Hey, how can you just learn all the patterns in language with engineering instead of having to use your language brain? And that is basically how my thesis came to be. It was about subword modeling. It's kind of a topic that's a bit specific to Finnish, but then it turns out to be kind of working very well for other languages, and that you can kind of really easily build new systems for new languages without expertise. And I have been joking, nowadays I speak a bit of Finnish, but all the speech recognizers I've ever built, the successful ones, are in languages that I don't know, at least not natively or not actually having studied for. That would be only English and Dutch. And for those languages, for English, I've made a good recognizer, but for Dutch, I've been a couple times starting the project, never had the time to actually make one that is actually perfect there, which is kind of ironic. But it just shows kind of you can actually just learn from this world, learn from data around. And funny kind of success in that one was we had a ceremony, an Arabic challenge. So the speech recognition community published a challenge saying hey, we have here 1,000 hours of Arabic data. Who can make the best
competition?
A competition. Who can make the best speech recognizer? You have 6 weeks time. Okay, 6 weeks. That's lovely. I have actually a holiday planned. So in the end, I think I had 4 or 5 weeks. I had never done anything with Arabic. Of course, I had all my tools, my scripts, my models that I kind of could start using. And within, 6 weeks, or for more 5, I was able to build the best Arabic speech recognizer in the world, beating other big universities, beating, local universities that did Arabic speech recognition all the, ages. And there, a guy from Finland, I had a couple of course, people that were helping me with it as well. But there, a very small team of Finland with minimal effort, at least human effort, computing wise, a lot, but human effort, we were actually able to win this. I was surprised myself. But on the other hand,
that's the biggest surprise, that you surprised yourself.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm a newbie and I want to understand how speech recognition works. So could you explain me in simple terms?
So as I mentioned, speech recognition is.
By the way, for the audience, I'm not the newbie, but yes, please explain. I am.
No, he's not. He's not. We're of course sitting more often in the same room, and Ali always asks, intelligent questions to kind of say can you not make it better like that? And then I'm yeah, we can. We thought of that, but it's good input. No. So speech recognition is a complex topic. And why is it complex? It is because it has very different sources of information. If you compare it with image recognition, it's easier. You have kind of a fixed amount of pixels. You have examples of elephants, and recognizing an elephant, you can kind of just look, hey, is that elephant similar? You don't need to know anything about giraffes. You don't need to know anything about hippos. Of course, you might misidentify a hippo as an elephant if you haven't seen hippos before. But in general, it's a one-to-one mapping between, the examples you have and what you see. Speech is different. Speech is, first, you have the sounds that people produce. You want to kind of like recognize them. Is this an A? Is this an E? Is this an O? And funnily enough, already, this is very different between different people. Between a woman and a man, there's like different pitches. There's different formants. And they go very fast. So it's over a time span you want to recognize. There's no clear boundaries. You want to recognize what sounds there are. So that's the first thing you do. Kind of like for each small bit of time, you recognize which sound is there, which is kind of like great. You have like a sequence of maybe this sound, maybe this sound. Doesn't give you a word yet. After that, you need to kind of like do real modeling. Like, hey, if you have this sequence of sound, which word could it be? In Finnish, it's actually pretty, easy. Sound corresponds to letter. In almost any other language, it doesn't. For example, English, this lovely like English language, you can have words that like are written almost the same and have a total different sequence of sounds. Or you have a sequence of sounds and you have different words, like the word to. I mean, T and U. Basically, what does to mean? Is it like the not did to? Is it like me too? Is it do you want to? Like there is so many different words that have exactly the same sounds. So figuring out like what words come out of there. Or in Finnish, like you keep on and sound longer. Does it mean it's double? Okay, that's good. In English, it doesn't. It might be one, it might be two. So then you go to words. And then even when you're at the word level, you're not recognizing words literally. You're recognizing something in context. And sometimes things sound very similar, but because of all the words around it, you actually know what the persons are saying. For example, a famous example in speech recognition is the phrase, how to recognize beach, or how to recognize speech. I don't know if you heard the difference, but a beach, so, like making certain the sentence is on the right place, or recognizing speech. For a computer, this is like, those sounds are different. Like, you have the exact same markers where are coming by. So you need to kind of like know which context you're talking about. If I'm talking about a youth that's hanging on a beach and like is doing stuff, then I'm pretty certain it's the recognize beach version. If you're actually like working in my field and you're talking about something, I'm pretty certain it's recognizing speech. Except we're always taking this example, meaning it could be either one again. So what is the kind of like, that is what makes it different, that like, you don't need to have like one source of information mapping how audio is mapped to kind of like certain sounds. It's then taking that context and, there's this language kind of like background that you have to add into it. So how does it work? I just told you how difficult it is. The work that you're doing is just kind of like engineering. We separate these parts. We make certain that we can like recognize these well, make a big network or mesh of options, and then try to find the best one. And once we have found the best one, we believe, okay, hey, this is what was being said, and we're actually telling it to the person. Of course, then you have speech recognition. If you want to have it in a product, you need to do the next step and make certain that those words aren't just printed as, lowercase words that are actually coming out, but actually like how the user wants to see it. If a doctor does speech recognition and he says heart rate is 80/40, is it always 80/40 or is it 40/80? You're the doctor.
Yeah, it's the higher is first.
Higher is first, so 120/80. So you don't want to have 120/80. You want 120/80. That's how I want it written down. So again, another context model that says like, hey, if this is a doctor doing medical speech, it has to learn automatically. And one thing is important here. Even though it sounds like you can capture this in rules, like sometimes computer programs are just, if this happens, then do this. It doesn't work in real life because you can never, again, you would maybe want a linguistic expert we still need one, by the way, even though my research was about like, hey, how to avoid having them all together. In the end, we need to understand where our systems are going wrong and where we need to teach them better. So, hey, after university, in real life, we're actually needing linguistic experts. And that's why we have a great one on board of the team. You can't have a linguistic expert define a model that would work for everything. You still need to learn it from data. So you kind of like, you make this model that kind of like say like, okay, hey, how do you go from a sound to a letter? And then you teach it you give a lot of examples to a system. And if you have given it enough examples, it will a certain amount get it, and it will be able to kind of like reproduce it. And also for things it hasn't seen before, estimate like, okay, hey, this is what it must be.
How much data you need to teach the model to recognize, for example, Finnish?
That's a good question. If you want to do it perfect, unlimited, please. That is always kind of like the thing, but it's always about what do you want. So, for example, yeah, if you're just, but this is anyway the case of kind of like generic speech recognition. There's a very difference between being able to do everything a bit well and doing something very right. So, for example, doctor speech, we want, for example, in Inscripta, we do speech recognition for medical professionals. So we want to get the speech of doctors right. So we have, at this moment, thousands of hours for like a normal language to kind of like do medical speech recognition. We could probably do it with 100 hours as well. It wouldn't be just as good. And especially a medical professional, he doesn't want to be bothered by mistakes. So you really kind of like aim for the highest accuracy possible. But again, even if we have thousands of hours of medical speech, it doesn't mean we would be necessarily good in working for a lawyer or something like that, who has like a total different type of speech. Or especially, let's say like this, if you're wanting to use speech recognition in your car on the way home from work and you want to send a message to your wife, it's totally different conditions. It's different words, it's different jargon that you're using, meaning whatever hours of data we have for medical, it doesn't mean that we actually can use it for building a good speech recognition for you sitting in the car, sending a message to your wife. So even though speech recognition sounds always the same, you go from one thing to another. The context and the place where it's put is really much mattering. And indeed, like when we talk about data, it's either from, sometimes we refine a model with just 10 hours of data. Perfect. But if we are building base models, we like it to have, 1,000 hours, 2,000 hours of data for a specific language to really kind of like get it going.
So let's move to the Inscripta. What is the company called Inscripta, and who does it serve?
So Inscripta is serving at this moment mainly medical professionals who are needing to document their work. So in Finland, when you go and visit a medical professional, so it can be a doctor, it can be a psychologist, it can be a therapist, they need to keep a record of what the visit was about. And when you're going then to your government web pages, you actually can see that record. You go to Omakanta and you can see that record of what was actually like happening. So they need to at least document that. And besides that, they need to write statements and stuff like this. For a doctor, this is actually like a significant amount of their time that they're actually spending on documentation. So people might sometimes see this when they're kind of like, when they're sick and they can't go to work, they just have a flu. What's happening, you go to to a doctor, an occupational healthcare doctor, you come into the room, and the guy sees you're having a flu. I mean, you both know you have a flu, and that, you need to eat burana. You need that sick leave paper, but the doctor needs to make a record of like, that you have a flu, that he prescribed you burana. So like after he has seen you for 2 minutes, he might, check your ears, check your throat. And like, both know there's nothing else that needs to be done at that moment. He moves to his computer and he starts typing. So you have been 2 minutes there explaining your symptoms. And after that, he starts typing for 6 minutes because he needs to do the documentation, write the prescription and stuff like this. The task that he has is mainly, documentation. And when you're going to other type of doctors, this is even much more, if he has been speaking with you, the doctor, for 10 minutes, he might be, when you leave the room, still be writing for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And this is very inefficient. We have a shortage of doctors in Finland. And even though it's very important to kind of like do that documentation, it must be possible to do this easier. And luckily there is. So in old times, they already like knew this. So already since the 70s and the 80s, the important doctors, the doctors that couldn't waste any time, they got a dictaphone. So what did they do? They kind of like recorded their voice on a cassette tape and gave the cassette tape to a secretary. Secretaries, they were much more readily available. And they would type out those documentation for the doctor. And the doctor didn't have to worry about it anymore. This is kind of like the premise where Inscripta was made on. So when Simo and Joni founded it in 2016, it was really about there's so many inefficiencies in between doctors sending tapes to secretaries to write them out and put them in a system. Even though tapes were already like partly replaced by software systems, it still happened. And even though software systems were from the, somewhere the Stone Age or like Iron Age, somewhere there, they weren't efficient. The doctors needed to be at a computer at a specific place. So Simo and Joni knew like, hey, we have to kind of like change this equation. We have to make it so that doctors can spend less time on documentation. They don't have to type with 2 fingers. They don't do this. So what did they do? The first thing they did was make just a very good application, web app, that, doctors grab their phone. Then whenever a patient was in, they just kind of like, basically walking to the next appointment or stuff. They quickly said what needed to be in the documentation. And it came in a portal where like secretaries would kind of like work on it and easily transfer it back. And already just having kind of like a good system for that was like the first victory. But they knew there was more to be had. So in 2018, finally kind of like, there was the first business and they could kind of like start optimizing this process. So they found me. They had actually been at Tolkien University about this Arabic challenge, and they were like, okay, this guy, we need to have him. I mean, there's more funny stories behind that, but like ask me those ones when you can like meet me.
Tell me about the funny story.
So Simo came on that on a presentation that I was giving about this Arabic challenge, not because he wanted to see that presentation, but it was inside a speech recognition course work. There was like a day where, people would tell about different things that were happening. And Simo was actually telling there about Inscripta and how he thought that speech recognition would kind of like make things better there. So he was talking first, I was talking after it, something like this. And he had actually along with him one machine learning engineer that he thought would be joining the team to kind of like look at speech recognition. After that speech recognition that machine learning engineer saw my presentation, I never know, of course, if it was a direct relation to kind of like, the complex system I explained. But he kind of like decided to go a bit different route with his career a few weeks later. So Simo was suddenly without an engineer that was actually going to do the speech recognition. And then Simo thought like, okay, who else do I know that can do speech recognition? And of course, I came to mind because he just saw my presentation there. And that's the moment he like asked me like, hey, let's have lunch. And after that lunch, it was kind of like clear, like, hey, this could be a match that I would be joining Inscripta. And indeed, a few months later, I actually joined Inscripta.
Tell me how your service works in practice.
So nowadays, we have moved on. So we don't need, like the first step was speech recognition is going to be just helping the secretaries write it faster. So instead of starting from scratch, you get a text already, you just make the fixes so that it's perfect, and then you send it back. But our speech recognition got so quickly good and better. It was good enough to put it in the doctor's hands straight away. And this was important because what was kind of like still missing of this flow where a doctor is kind of like, dictating it, sending it to a secretary, and it appears in the system, it was a delay. So 3 days later, the doctor would need to check the notes that the secretary had made to officially click and put them in the system. And if they made a referral to the next physician wouldn't actually see the notes because, they weren't in the system yet. So what was kind of like the best thing to do was like, hey, give speech recognition to the doctor straight away. And not just kind of like, built in one particular application where you can kind of like only use speech recognition right there. No, nowadays, a doctor can take our solution. It's installed on their desktop machine. The speech recognition done is in the cloud, but it's really an application on their computer. They click on the microphone, they click where they want to have text written, they speak, and within no time, the text is actually there. And no time, I mean real time. Real time, the text is there. So whenever they speak, they stop. A second later, all the text is there. And it is so good that barely any correction needs to be made. And this is both faster than typing when especially because at that moment you need to think about the content and about how you format it at the same time. And especially doctors that are trained in that, they can dictate much faster because, they open their charts, they open like the data they need to see, they start speaking and kind of like at once can finish like a whole patient dictation without kind of like even taking a break. And we have doctors that have told us that an occupational healthcare doctor, for example, said that normally with the same amount of patients that he was seeing on a day, so on Monday is always the most busy day, he started going 1.5 hours earlier home on Mondays than before. The number of patients didn't change, but the way that he could do speech, like this documentation, was so much faster. One thing that even helped is that he could be able to do it straight after the visit when everything was fresh in his memory, because otherwise his visits were scheduled so close to each other. He didn't have time to finish them. So he had half-written notes. And then, at home or on the end of the day, he started doing his documentation. This actually like worked. And this is like how speech recognition really kind of like helps them to just, like finish that visit straight away. So the visit has been, you take the few minutes to write your patient note, it goes to the next system and it can be out of mind and like the next patient can be helped. And this is really something that, the whole healthcare industry is actually seeing this, how this is like transforming it. Now, what we have done is make a tool, make this speech recognition work for doctors. And at a price, like there's other kind of like companies that have tried this at an enormous price. You can't like, they could, because it is actually like saving so much time. They were like, okay, hey, we can ask 300 euros per doctor per month for this type of like tool. And people would pay it because, speech recognition works, even though ours is better. Maybe we could have asked 600, but we decided not to do that. What we decided to do is like, hey, let's actually put this on a price that it's not something that a doctor has to negotiate with his boss, but that it's just as accessible as like email, that like it's a no-brainer for an hospital to give their doctors speech recognition and their nurses and their therapists and anyone that needs to be doing documentation. And sorry, I'm not talking about speech recognition anymore. I'm talking about my enthusiasm for like how we actually can change like healthcare, because speech recognition isn't for everyone. And no one should be forced to use speech recognition if they're really kind of like, liking typing. But it should be available to everyone. It shouldn't be dependent on where exactly in a hospital you work and what your current salary is. It must be a tool that is like, a utility that just helps you to kind of like give, I believe, even better patient care, because the notes are getting better and faster patient care. And, people actually like being able to know what has happened in their visits. So yeah, documentation is good and it helps, especially when you have a good workflow, a good way to do this and good tools to do this. And we see in Finland that, so many hospital districts have catched on this. I believe we are at this moment in all these regions. I actually lost count. I think we're at this moment in only like the past year that's really started, like 6 or 8 already of the 23 regions, and many more that actually have shown an interest because they see this is actually like helping healthcare. And that's what kind of like makes me rumble nowadays. It's not anymore. Seeing beautiful engineered code, that makes me happy. But actually seeing an impact on society, that makes me even happier. Was that the answer to your question?
That was excellent and a very, very good answer. I'm really pleased. Can you tell us about your clients?
Yeah, so we are having, our clients and our users are often a small bit different. So, the users are the nurses, the therapists, and the doctors. In rare cases, doctors or nurses or therapists would kind of like buy it themselves. In the end, our customers are big organizations. So an occupational healthcare provider or a big private healthcare provider or an hospital region. Especially in Finland, we have had recently the healthcare reform. So before that, it might be still that, a municipality would buy it for all the doctors in their health centers. Nowadays, it's always on a scale that we like an healthcare region. So one of the 23 regions that we have is or county, it's the right word apparently, is buying this for a number of their doctors, all of their doctors at the same time. So our most famous customers are, for example, in Finland, there's a few big private companies, and many of them have actually, for example, Pihlajalinna is one of our customers that we can kind of like publicly mention. And on the public region side, so we have, for example, Pirkanmaa region, which is kind of like very active and enthusiastic in using our tool, or even in Åland, actually, our tools are being used for helping speech recognition. And as I said, 6 to 8 regions I believe we are in at the moment. And actually, like just 2 new ones came on board this week, which is like, yeah, nothing could make me happier when this is going so fast.
Excellent. Let's go back in time. How did you end up being a CEO in Inscripta?
Yeah, indeed. So indeed, when I came on board, I became a speech recognition engineer. So for 3 years, I was the person that actually did speech recognition. Funnily enough, in the first 4 months, the first speech recognizer rolled out of the engineering department, which was then for speech recognition, which was me. So within 4 months, we had the first speech recognizer. And again, the background from university to like, be able to kind of like touch all parts of speech recognition really helped me to deliver something very quickly there. And it wasn't as perfect as it was now. And after that, we just refined it, made it from something that happens on the background to something in your face, and actually like very good kind of like quality, suitable for multiple languages. As a company, we had challenges, however. We had challenges getting this sold. So funnily enough, our clients were slightly ahead of us. So we were trying to sell a platform for making this, we call it backend transcription. So secretary writing this out. We were trying to sell that platform while hospitals were already seeing like, hey, we just need speech recognition. That's kind of like right there for doctors. Anyway, that was not our product yet. Our product, that part of the product only got really kind of like finished in 2021, basically like spring. And there was anyway a small crisis inside the company. I had just joined the board a couple months earlier. The founder and CEO Simo, he had to go and do something else for a moment. And I stepped in first temporarily, and then the board very quickly said, take over as entrepreneur and like take this ship kind of like further. And luckily, I mean, Simo took a different role. He's like heading our sales and doing a perfect job in that. And I got a company in my hands that's, okay, yeah, I mean, I was an engineer. I had kind of like, done the speech recognition. Of course, I was very close to the ones doing the management, and I always had like a strong, loud opinion about things. I mean, hey, being Dutch. I mean, I knew something about like how the company had been run or had been doing. But yeah, I stood there as an engineer in the summer of 2021. A lot of other like life changes happening as well, like moving countries actually. And there I was. So totally not ready, but becoming the CEO and actually like starting the journey of like looking to the whole company instead of just being interested about the accuracy of our speech recognizer.
How bad the situation was?
Not good. As I said, so the fit that we had kind of like between what the market wanted and our product was perfect. Market was nice and friendly, but they didn't match together. And then we had, of course, taken the first steps. I mean, also as an engineer, like, you were seeing that already and you were making your product so that like, hey, it would be fitting better to the market. But we were burning money each month. The cash balance on the account was going multiple tens of thousands kind of like down each month. And the end was kind of like in sight, or the end was kind of like near. And only because like some people jumped in with giving us a loan, we were actually like keeping our head just above the water. So something needed to change. First, we needed to kind of like get a new investment round so that we had kind of like a good amount of cash again to kind of like do something with, of course. And second thing was, what do we change as a company so that actually the road is going upwards instead of kind of like, staying kind of like stable and staying on the burning money level. So yeah, I think that's, I mean, those first months, they were interesting. They were really kind of like, on a daily basis, checking the bank accounts and knowing exactly like which charges were going to go off the next 3 days to kind of like make certain that you weren't hitting the zero mark, especially when salary day would kind of like come and people would need to be paid their salaries. And at the same time, you had to kind of like prep yourself for kind of like telling investors like, hey, we need money. And this money, it is not just because we have this grandiose idea that we have had already like a long time, but it's just we need the money because otherwise we're not there. And luckily we had like very good investors and a very like committed kind of like investor team. We actually have like angels investors, a big group of those. And they were kind of like willing to kind of like based on what we were saying and like of the picture that we had. And that picture it turned out to be completely right. Like, hey, we see that doctors need this tool. And we were able to put that picture out and actually going from there and like take that money, have at least a small bit of money in the bank account and really kind of like turn around by strategizing and really kind of focusing on a particular group of customers. At that moment, that was small municipalities in Finland, deals that we could close within, a month or two. And actually like, get again another 10 doctors on board, get another 20 doctors on board, not focus on very big hospital regions where, the process might take a year. And it worked because, a year later, we were cash flow positive. I mean, in a startup, this is something that, it rarely happens. Like, but we in November 2022, it's the first month that, our bank balance went up instead of kind of like down on the end of the month. And of course, being a startup, you start investing straight away and you never can like, what is profitable? We want to be kind of like growing. We want to actually like make an impact. And after that, but we have been able to kind of like stay on that and actually be, profitable like to 2023, our first profitable year, just by like taking very small steps to kind of like make certain that, you're focusing on the right things, focusing on the right customers and making your product like really kind of like suitable for that customers that you have in mind.
Can you also tell us about how you with your team transitioned the revenue from the service business into a license business?
What part of kind of like the increase in revenue that we also, or like in decrease in cash flow that we had was indeed what we started with was, and we still have this in a very kind of like limited sense. The first thing we sold was just the transcription services. So just the secretary and the mobile app. So a doctor is able to kind of like speak in his mobile and our secretaries would make very quickly like a dictation and we just get paid per dictation. And it's a service business. So there's people actually involved. What we tried to really sell was this SaaS platform so that hospitals would have their own secretaries. That didn't work. But then when we are kind of like, beginning 2021, had that product ready, this speech recognition for doctors, we were like believing in it. We were really kind of like saying like, yes, this is what we need. So we had one customer, a small municipality that had, I think they had, 5,000 euros in transcription each month. So like they would kind of like send dictations. We would transcribe them for them. They would pay us 5,000. And of course, of that 4,000 went to actually the secretaries. We made a deal with this company. We said, you get as many speech recognition licenses as you want and as much transcription as you want for 4,000 euros a month, which kind of like maybe doesn't make sense. We give them much more. But what we thought would happen actually happened. This organization, people noticed the quality of speech recognition, the advantages of actually like being able to see it straight away. And within no time, it was indeed, their transcription volumes actually like, halved. So I think they maybe were doing still transcription worth of 2,000 and 2,000 euros of like speech recognition on top, which was for us a SaaS product where we didn't need to like, pay a secretary anymore to actually like finish the dictations and actually like, being able to grow as a SaaS business. And this is what we have done with actually most of our old customers. So again, most of our old customers, they still have a few doctors that like the old workflow. And I mean, good for them. They can actually use that. It's fine. But most of their users have actually transformed to speech recognition, which is both cheaper for the organizations themselves, gives kind of like faster results, makes doctors happier, and makes us happier because we don't need so much transcription capacity and actually like have a product that's just kind of like delivered much easier.
How long does it take to turn the ship, and what's the current situation?
I think that, of course, the decision to turn a ship, that's kind of like an instant. Of course, you need to kind of like make the decision. That takes time. I think when I became CEO, so within like, a month or two, we kind of like were making that decision as in like, really start focusing on that particular vertical. And healthcare is moving slow. So, you can see it as a very big oil tanker that at the moment you have made the decision to change, it takes time before, your ship is pointing in the right direction when those sales are coming in. We did, however, kind of like, chose the right direction. And indeed, it was taking only months before we start seeing the first kind of like revenue coming in from these deals. And indeed, it took a year to go from very much in the minus each month to actually like, having just enough cash so that we kind of like could keep everything running without needing a new investment round straight away. And yeah, I mean, maybe even in the past things that I've been saying, not enough credit to the team, because throughout, the hard time that we have had, because, being so kind of like, much negative in your finances, even though, especially in 2021, we were able to keep everyone on board, and like we didn't have to like, let go of any salaries. It was a stressful period, and yet this team stick together. And at this moment, all people that were there in 2020, one developer has kind of like left the team, and otherwise, all 10 of us are still there, and we really kind of like did this together, really together kind of like turned this ship. In the end, the decisions had to be made, with the board. We kind of like, really kind of like thought about this, and like they really helped me to kind of like, as this noob, this engineer, to kind of like, focus on kind of like, a long-term picture on a strategy, and like just making a choice. And whether we were making the right one, we didn't know. That's the hard part. You can't always, see all the parts that are coming after it. But we did it, and we sticked with it. And especially when we were sticking with it, it really went in the right direction. And after that, we could very easily like expand to take on indeed the bigger cases, take on these whole regions now that they're actually like existing and actually going that way. So that was really, it was a team effort, but it just takes perseverance. It takes sticking to it, and sometimes making hard choices. Like, hey, I mean, don't have money for an office. Then we don't have an office. Then we work from home. We don't have money to do anything fun. We just, we pay our salaries. We eat our food, and otherwise we work together so that we actually can build something that, makes an impact. And that's where we're now. We're having something that makes an impact. We're profitable. We are growing. We have grown 2 years in a row, almost 100%, so doubled twice, and looking to double again this year. And in startup world, that's almost like, a perfecta when you're doing that while being profitable. So normally you would take on big funding rounds in order to achieve this type of growth rates. And for us, this is now just working on the shoulders of the team, and the decisions that we have made in the past.
Lastly, what would you say to young people who are thinking entrepreneur as a career?
I mean, I never chose for being an entrepreneur as a career, in the sense that
you were chosen.
I was chosen, and I said yes, but it was in my blood. I believe that like people that want to be successful, I mentioned earlier, they need to have this T-shaped skill. So you need to know at least something of everything, and that's important for an entrepreneur. So keep your eyes open. Don't focus on like, hey, I want to be an IT entrepreneur, so I only get an MBA, or I only get, an IT degree. But actually, like, have a wide interest. Become a farmer. Become a farmer. Do everything yourself. And actually, like, or at least be around those people that go through the different things, because that is what learns you to, take on unexpected challenges. An entrepreneur will be, I mean, my week is going from writing a marketing post to a very tough engineering problem, to talking with the board, to fixing my cash flow, to talking with people that have cash flow software about like whether their integration for my particular accounting system is coming the next day. There's so many
it's
things.
Already ready.
It's already ready. That's good. That's good. Very good. So then we're going to go and try it out. That is, I think, the first thing. So you need to be able to do everything, and like always look to yourself as in, I mean, not afraid to try things out. And when you have done it, think about yourself like, hey, okay, so how did I do that compared to how others would do that? And how do I do it next time better? I mean, mess up a lot of times, but learn from it, and really kind of like go through it. And that is what, as an entrepreneur, you need to be doing. You need to keep on reinventing yourself, keep on challenging yourself, and keep on honestly evaluating yourself, honestly looking to yourself like, what I now did, like what I did in the past month, is it actually making sense? Did I get just fireworks behind myself?
Yes, I think it was because of my Mac, so it was recognized image, and that suited very well. We are finalizing here. Thank you, Peter Smith, very much from Inscriptaan. Thank you for this amazing interview.
Thank you, Ali, and we'll keep on working hard. Ali is also part of Inscripta in the board, and together we are like doing this great. And I can't wait to indeed try Caleido and actually use that integration.
Thank you.
All right. See ya.